Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to our NVNR YA romance panel, our reimagining of conferences for both NABA and SIBA. I'm very honored to be your MC moderator tonight, although moderator sounds odd. I don't envision any type of cat fight breaking out amongst our amazing panelists today. First of all, I would like to thank our publisher sponsors for this panel, Scholastic, Abrams Books, Bloomsbury, and HarperCollins. We thank them very much. What we're going to do is go around and introduce you to 4 wonderful YA authors and have them talk about their work. We would love for all of you watching to say hi, shout out your stores in the chat. We are not including a Q&A portion in this because we do have limited time, but if you do have individual questions for the authors, please feel free to drop them into the chat and we will make sure that the authors receive them. And we're going to make sure to share those with the authors later on. So without further ado, I will tell you off the bat that our 4 authors tonight are Ellen Hagan, Sajni Patel, Cyantani Das Gupta, and Brian Kennedy. We had like a virtual thumb wrestle earlier and decided on just alphabetical. And after much chanting of the alphabet, we will be starting first with Cyantani Das Gupta telling us about her wonderful new book, Debating Darcy. Cyantani?
Well, thank you so much, Alicia, and thank you for having us here tonight. It's such a delight, as always, to talk to those of you who are getting stories into the hands of readers. And, you know, in these times, I can't say enough about how much I appreciate the work that you're doing, getting stories out there, and just, you know, how critical and important it is. So thank you, booksellers and all folks dealing with stories. I wanted to tell you today about Debating Darcy, which is my YA debut. I've been writing middle grade. I've written the Kieran Mullen, the Kingdom Beyond series, Force of Fire, some other books, but this is my first YA. And it's really near and dear to my heart because as I imagine some of you in the audience might, you know, share this quality with me, I am a huge Jane Austen fanatic. And, you know, I have read all the books. I have seen all the movie adaptations. I have very strong opinions about, like, you know, Mr. Darcy's hand flex, Colin Firth. Like, I have a lot of opinions about all the things. And so I've been really thinking about doing a reimagining of Pride and Prejudice for years and years. And I honestly just didn't have the courage because I love Jane Austen so much. I wanted to make sure that I could do her justice and I could do the parts of her story that I love so much justice. So what I've done is I've taken Jane Austen's classic 1813 novel, Pride and Prejudice, and really thought about what the heart of it is and tried to reimagine that heart forward into a contemporary setting. So I'm just going to read you parts of the author's note, but I won't read all of it. I'll talk in between it. So the beginning of my author's note goes like this. Dear reader, it is a truth universally acknowledged that Pride and Prejudice's Lizzie and Darcy are among the most iconic examples of enemies to lovers couples. In Austen's 1813 novel, the pair bicker, fight, and debate their way into falling in love. So it made perfect sense to me to set my modern reimagining in the ultra-competitive world of high school speech and debate tournaments. So this is the story. Debating Darcy is the story of Leela Bose, who goes to a public school. She goes to Longbourn High. And instead of 5 sisters, my Lizzie character, my Leela, has a kind of ragtag, quite chaotic team of fellow speech and debate competitors who comprise kind of her chosen family. And in the beginning of the novel, she meets Rose Darcy, who is, you know, at first glance, an extremely arrogant, privileged, debate competitor from the private Netherfield Academy. And he kind of rubs Leela the wrong way at their first encounter, their first impression, which was the original title, right, of Jane Austen's novel. And Leela decides she's going to take this guy down a peg or two. Not only is she going to switch from speech competition to debate, but she decides she's going to do it in order to humiliate this guy, to take him down, to really teach him a thing or two. And of course, in the process of that bickering and fighting and debating, the two might just kind of debate their way into falling in love, just like Lizzie and Darcy in the original novel. So I'll just read you the two kind of final paragraphs of this reader's note and pass it on to my lovely fellow authors to tell you about their books. So in the reader's note, I write, "This is a novel that celebrates the power of finding your community and speaking your truth, even when it's scary." So there's a kind of Me Too moment at the end of the book where the terrible Mr. Wickham from the original novel kind of finally gets his just desserts. It's a novel about knowing we are all worthy of taking up space in the world. In between the wit and banter, the complex debate topics, and funny musical theater references. I was a huge musical theater nerd, as well as a speech and debate competitor, so there's a lot of that in there. This is ultimately a story about justice and honor, friendship and love. So, dear reader, whether you have, like me, read and watched versions of Pride and Prejudice a zillion times, or really never heard of it until now, I hope you find power, laughter, courage, and joy in these pages. Because words matter. Art matters. Debating the issues that affect our lives matters. Your voice matters. You matter. And love, in all its beautiful romantic and non-romantic derivations, matters most of all. So I hope you all enjoy and your readers enjoy Debating Darcy. I look forward to chatting some more with my fellow authors about it, but I think for now I will hand it off to Ellen. Are you next in the alphabet? H-I-J-K, I think you are.
I think that's right. I think that's right. Thank you,
Ellen.
Sayantani.
Ellen is next, but I am going to interject and say right off the bat, I totally dropped the ball because I have this wonderful bio that I was going to read for each of you. And of course, I, so concerned with the alphabet that I am just Sayantani very quickly because it is such a lovely and impressive bio. And you did talk about your Kiranmala stories, which the most incredible. I love this description that they are Bengali folktale and string theory inspired. I love how encompassing that is.
Why not?
But the first of the books, The Serpent Secret, was a Bank Street Best Book of the Year, a Booklist Best Middle Grade Novel of the 21st Century, and an E.B. White Read Aloud Honor Book. Sayantani is a pediatrician by training, but now teaches at Columbia University. When not writing or reading, Sayantani spends time watching cooking shows with her trilingual children and protecting her Black Labrador Retriever Cushy from the many things that scare him, including plastic bags. She is a team member of We Need Diverse Books and can be found online at CyantaniDasGupta.com and on Twitter at Sayantani16. And I just wanted to make sure that all of your incredibly impressive credentials got into this. And it's probably a good thing I forgot because otherwise I would ask you pediatric questions about my child before we started. So,
thank you so much.
Thank you for that. So for our next wonderful author, we have Ellen Hagan, who is a writer, performer, and educator. She's the author of Reckless, Glorious Girl and co-author with Renee Watson of Watch Us Rise. Her poetry collections include Blooming Fiascos, Hemisphere, and Crowned. Her work can be found in ESPN Magazine, She Walks in Beauty, and Southern Sin. Ellen is the director of the poetry and theater departments at the Dreamyard Project and directs their international poetry exchange program with Japan, South Korea, and the Philippines. She co-leads the Alice Hoffman Young Writers Retreat at Adelphi University. Please welcome Ellen Hagan.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It is beautiful to be here with you all tonight. And I love hearing about all of the books. I have an 11-year-old who is very into debating. And so now I'm like adding all the books to my lists for myself and my kids. So my name is Ellen Hagan. Again, I'm going to be talking about Don't Call Me a Hurricane. And this is a book, I'll give you the little sort of synopsis, and I'll talk through a few sort of points I'd love to share about the book. So Don't Call Me a Hurricane is a novel in verse. It's about a group of young environmental activists. They've lived through a hurricane on their small island home. It's actually set in Long Beach Island, New Jersey. My family had a home there for 20 plus years. So I spent many summers down the Jersey shore. It's the summer before their senior year, and their biggest action is protecting the Clam Cove Reserve. It's an area of marshlands it's in danger of being destroyed by overdevelopment. So Eliza Moreno is the main character. She's 17 years old. It's the summer before she's about to graduate. And she finds herself falling in love with a tourist who is holding on to a secret that has to do with the marshlands. So the story is an exploration of family, community, the ocean. It's really, to me, it's a story about close friendships, families, surfing, lifeguarding, protecting this coastal landscape, falling in love, crushes, and dealing with anxiety and figuring out how to heal from trauma. This is a high school student who's really figuring out how to navigate her own anxiety and figuring out how to come to terms with it and how to move forward from it. It's rooted in climate justice. So it's a love story for home and for protecting that home that you love, but that's also at deep risk. The whole story arrived in poems for me. I started as a poet, and this novel in verse felt like there were so many emotions. It felt like the idea that these poems could hold all of these, the highs and lows of being a teenager and dealing with the changing climate and how you navigate all of these many things at once. As an educator, I work with young people all of the time, and I'm thinking often about how do they carry so much with them? All of us are carrying so much in the world. And for Eliza and her friends, they're carrying the joy of friendship and celebrating who they are as they start to go into high school, into their senior year of high school, but they're also trying to protect this place that they love so much. Novels in verse feel like there's a clear economy of language. It's distilled language, so it feels like holding on to these deep emotions in these very these taut, clear lines. I want to read a couple of poems for you, and I'll say a couple more things about the novel. My father used to call me a hurricane, wild and unruly, rowdy and messy, fast and reckless, unmoving and impulsive, headstrong and willful, unexpected and quick, electric and fleeting, floating and flying, scrappy and breakneck. All the time moving and flowing and hurried and flashing and free, free, free. Now we are careful not to compare anything to a hurricane because we know how dangerous and destructive it can be. We know its toll from the US to the Caribbean, to China, to Canada, to Cuba, and on, wrecking lives and families across the globe. We know its winds and rains, floods and rising waters. We know the damage and the loss. We know the trauma and the pain and the doubled over and the weeping and my mother holding on to us to save us from the storm. How the shape of our lives changed forever. We know the cost. And I'll just say that the novel is broken up. So we are in modern times. So the young people are fighting back to save the marshlands, but we also have flashbacks. So there are 4 sections of flashbacks where the family is navigating the hurricane. So we see her family in the middle of the hurricane and how the community of Long Beach Island dealt with the hurricane that was happening. It was also very heavily inspired by Hurricane Sandy. And so you'll see, if you're someone who is in any coastal region or in any place that is at risk of flooding or at risk of any type of climate change, which is everywhere. I think this book will hopefully speak to you and will feel like it's a connection to the young people. The last thing I'll say, that if you read Watch Us Rise, in the back of Watch Us Rise, we had a lot of resources, and the same is true for this novel. There are activists that you can follow, organizations and other writers who are addressing climate change and writing about and creating the dialogue about climate change. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that, Ellen, and for your beautiful, impassioned reading of that excerpt, which really takes us there. Deeply appreciated. So our next author is Brian D. Kennedy, and he will be talking about his debut novel, A Little Bit Country. Brian D. Kennedy was born and raised in Minnesota and now lives in New York City with his husband and their miniature schnauzer, whose name I will ask when this is over. When not writing, he can be found working at an LGBTQ nonprofit. His slightly unhealthy obsessions include seeing as many Broadway shows as possible, buying weird trinkets off eBay, and all things Dolly Parton. So please welcome Brian D. Kennedy.
Thank you, Alicia. And I just want to thank everyone for having me here. This is actually my first panel. So it's very special and quite an honor, and I'm very excited to be here tonight and to talk about my book. This is one of my first times really talking about my book outside of my family and friends. So I wrote A Little Bit Country. It comes out, we just have this week we got a new release date. It comes out June 7th, a week later than I thought, but we're rolling with it. We're still excited. And yeah, I'll give you a little synopsis first, and then I'll talk about why I wrote it. So this is a story, it's dual POV. It's about two boys, and the first one is Emmett McGuire. He's from Chicago, and he has dreams of being the biggest, gayest country music star that there ever was. And he has an aunt who lives in Tennessee, which is also the hometown of his country music idol, Wanda Jean Stubbs, who is sort of our Dolly Parton stand-in. And he gets the opportunity to go perform in one of the shows at her park for the summer, which is like his biggest dream. And he thinks it's gonna get him to that next step of stardom, of being a superstar. And then our other character is Luke Barnes, who is from Tennessee, from Jackson Hollow, which is the town that this is set in. And he is very different from Emmett. So Emmett is obviously out and proud about it. And Luke is still kind of figuring out who he is. And he doesn't feel like he's in a very safe space to be open and honest about his sexuality with people. So he kind of keeps it hidden. He also has dreams of his own that he's very shy about and unsure about. He would love to be a chef someday, but due to some family problems, he doesn't really see that working out for him. He feels like he has to provide for his family and sort of be taking care of his mom who's sick. So when the chance comes along to take a cooking job, however, at Wanda World, which is the theme park that Emmett's working at, Luke can't pass it up. He knows it's too good to be true, so he takes it. The only thing is, it's one more thing he has to keep a secret, because his grandmother was a country western star as well, and she had a big falling out with Wanda Jean Stubbs, and it's sort of, he thinks it ruined their life and their family, so he has to, this is one more thing he has to keep secret from his family. And because of that, Luke is not a country music fan. So of course, when he and Emmett meet at the park, they naturally sparks fly, and things get complicated from there. So I wrote this book. I mean, I think mainly the idea came from just being a massive Dolly Parton fan. I always wanted to go to Dollywood, which is her theme park in Tennessee. And it got me thinking about what kind of stories could be told there. And this is the one my brain came up with. But while I was writing it, I mean, it became a lot more than just that. Yes, it's a love letter to Dolly Parton, but it's also a love letter to finding your true authentic self. And in this case, it's through the lens of queerness, but I think any reader can relate to it, to the finding your authenticity, because Luke and Emmett really have to sort of decide who they are, who they want to be, and how open they can be about that. And one of the things that was important for me in writing this book was, since I set it up that Luke is not in an environment where it's safe to be out, but he's still very proud to be from the South, and it's not that he wants to leave. He just needs to find what works for him with his family in his hometown and not trying to get out of there. So it's also very much a love letter to country music and to living in the South, in addition to all those things. And I wasn't going to read anything, but since other people have, I'll give it a go here. So one of the biggest challenges in writing this for me was I decided to add in original lyrics, which if you're not a songwriter, I don't know if I would recommend that. And I can't promise these will be any good. The one I'm going to read, it's a little anti-feminist, but that was on purpose, and you just have to trust me on this. I sort of modeled this after like a Loretta Lynn song from like the 70s. So it's kind of that era, but later you find out other things. So just keep that in mind. And I'm not going to sing, I'm just going to speak it because you do not want to hear me sing. Mama made it look so easy as she tied a bow in her apron strings. But what Mama never told us is that being someone's wife comes with a list of things. The dishes need washing and the pork needs roasting. Shirts can't iron themselves and that party needs hosting. Your legs need shaving and your hair needs dyeing. Makeup ain't cheap and, oh no, is that the baby crying? It ain't always pretty, but we do what we can. Because when you're a woman, you got to keep a smile on your man. Yeah, if you want to be a woman, you got to keep a smile on your man. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brian. I really appreciate that. Although I'd still love to hear you sing those lyrics. Thank you for sharing. So now we're going to move on to our final author, who will discuss her new book. And so please welcome, our next author is Sajni Patel, who is the author of both adult and YA debuts that published in 2020. The Trouble with Hating You was the first of two women's fiction titles to be published with Grand Central Forever to fabulous buzz. Apple Books selected it for their 10 debuts to read in 2020, and Publishers Weekly has called it a fast-paced romp of a debut. The cultural specificity Patel brings makes this rom-com feel fun and fresh. Her YA debut, The Knockout, was published in January 2021 from Flux. She currently lives in Texas, and she is here to talk about her fabulous new novel, My Sister's Big Fat Indian Wedding. Please welcome Sajni Patel.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm just going to apologize off the bat for my coughing fits that will probably come up. As you mentioned, I write adult rom-coms, and this is my second YA book. I just found out actually a couple weeks ago that my my debut YA, The Knockout, it was adopted by the New York City public school system, like Department of Education, to be part of their upcoming Mosaic program curriculum. So that was really exciting. I'm not quite sure exactly what that means, but from what I know, it was a cool thing. So a couple of years ago, my brother had his own big fat Indian wedding. And this might be a common thing among many South Asians, but you have to understand, in my family, we're very quiet and reserved, and our weddings are very small and boring. So when my brother had his wedding, it was very cinematic, and he literally had 4 pages of a schedule, like single space, front and back, of all the things that were going to happen, all the events. And this includes all the choreographed dances, because there were many, many dances. And it was just so surprising, but also so colorful and beautiful and loving, that these emotions stayed with me for a while. And I felt like I really wanted to share this experience with readers. And I ended up coming up with My Sister's Big Fat Indian Wedding. Obviously changed it a little bit to this bride side, because I think bride side is much more fun. I've never been on that side, but I feel like from what I saw at this wedding, my sister-in-law side had a lot of fun. I mean, they get paid a lot. Like, they have these games where you steal shoes and you sit on the groom's car to prevent him from leaving with the bride after the wedding, and everything results in the groom having to pay them. So it was a very fun wedding. I realized at some point that it needed a plot. It couldn't just be a wedding, as fun as it was. And I thought, well, my debut YA, The Knockout, was about competition. It was a sports competition. So I kind of leaned toward the competition again, this time it resulting in a creative future for my protagonist. So the story is about an Indian senior, high school senior, who is expected to go into law school because all of her family are these great feminist lawyers. And she's just expected to go that route as well. But the thing is she's very gifted with the violin, and not just classical, but hip hop and rap and rock and just like all these cool things that you can do with a violin these days. And as I was trying to decide which instrument she was going to play, I literally just picked the easiest one for her to carry around and not be, a giant piano or a cello. And I realized, well, my brother, he plays the violin. He's self-taught in 5 musical instruments, and he's like the only musician in the family. And so oftentimes he would play theme songs for me, like Game of Thrones or the old X-Men's cartoon show and things like that. And I thought, wow, the violin is really cool. So I incorporated that into the story. And Zuri is wanting to go into Juilliard. She wants to pursue music as her profession. And she doesn't get into Juilliard in the very beginning of the book. And her last chance of getting into music college for the upcoming semester is to compete in this very prestigious musical competition that draws in a lot of college scouts from across the country. And she has to sneak out during her sister's big fat Indian wedding week, because Indian weddings, all the traditions and events, there's so many, and it does last about a week. And so she's having to go out and practice for the reception and the wedding, but also be present for all the things, because as the sister to the bride, she really has to be there for everything. Plus, filling goodie boxes and, the little things like that. So she has to sneak out to this competition to try to get her foot in the door into some musical college that's going to make her dreams come true. And at the same time, there is a budding romance, because of course, one of her competitors happens to be the cousin of the groom that's visiting from South Africa, Naveen. And there's like a little bit of a budding romance between them, but also like fierce competition, because they both want to get into the musical college of their dreams. So throughout the story, our protagonist, Zurika, has to balance all of this and also figure out how to stand up for herself and actually tell her family the truth of what she wants to do, instead of being pushed into a career that she's going to hate. And that kind of stems from personal experience. My parents expected me to be a doctor. I was almost there, but I couldn't quite cut it with math. And I chose the creative routes, and that's where I am today. So that kind of stems from my personal experience. One of the coolest things about this book for myself, I don't know if anyone else thinks it's cool, but I think it's cool, is that when the art department was coming up with a cover, my beautiful cover, they knew that the story was inspired by my brother's wedding. So they actually asked for pictures in the highlight video of the wedding, and they incorporated it into the cover. So if you see the part where like, this is my brother coming in on a horse with the shades on, because you're extra when you're an Indian wedding. He came in on a horse. My sister-in-law's cousins are dancing and doing all these things on the cover. And I decided to go with a big family. My family is very small, but I decided in the book to go with the big, loud family. And they were really inspired by my sister-in-law's cousins, because they're all girls, and they're all ambitious and outgoing and just amazing women, amazing young women. And they really left a mark on me during the wedding ceremony. So I really wanted to incorporate that sisterhood and that bonding into the book. So there's a lot of characters, there's a lot of family, but there's also a lot of support for, the sisters and the female bonds that we have in the book. So that's it.
Thanks so much, Sajni. Thanks so much to all of you for sharing, your personal insights into your books. As I was reading all of the books, and something, when people hear the genre romance, subgenre, any subgenre, YA romance, adult romance, queer romance, whatever, there tends to be an immediate like, well, is that it? That's what it's all about. And one of the things that I loved about all of your books is that while, yes, they each contain a major component that is romance, that is finding themselves and finding somebody else, is in none of the books are the romances the be all end all final prize of the story. Each of your books contains characters who, Brian, as you said, are working on finding or maintaining their authentic selves. And that stood out to me so much in these books. When there's so much more than just the romance. If you could in turn talk a little bit about finding the balance between, Ellen, for you, with climate justice and the importance of that, but also dealing with trauma. Cyantani dealing with sexism in sort of like a group setting, in a culture that a lot of readers are not necessarily familiar with, the forensics world. Ellen, a lot of your readers, most of them probably have never experienced what your characters did. Brian, in terms of a queer kid navigating, loving where he comes from and struggling with coming out in the world of country music, which has not been a friendly place to LGBTQ plus artists. And Sajni, for your character to so fully embrace all of these traditions of her family, and she does embrace them. She's not trying to escape out of them, but to, embrace them while also experiencing this new relationship and staying true to her music. Can you each talk a little bit about balancing the romance with the rest?
Do you want me to go
And
first,
whoever wants
so
to
we
go
can
first.
go back in our circle?
Sure, yeah.
All right. So that's such an interesting and kind of thoughtful question. Thank you. First, I just want to say, love is always enough, right? And I think particularly right now, kind of in these times, these kind of deeply fraught times, I just feel like writing stories about love and joy, particularly, I feel, I'll speak for myself here. I feel like as a writer of color, a woman of color, writing a story about love and joy and delight and romance is revolutionary, right? Love is revolutionary. And I do think that. So I in no way want to say like, oh, but there's all this other stuff in my book too, and somehow decenter the fact that I think love is enough. Love is everything. Love is revolutionary. And I'm delighted to be writing a story about love, about friendship love, sisterly love, and romantic love, and love for yourself, which I think is a big theme in my book as well. But I also think that, we're all three-dimensional, holistic people, and ideally, our characters are also. I love writing flawed characters. So for me, writing Leela and Feroz, who are not just, different because one's from a public school, one's from a private school, that class conflict that was in the original Jane Austen novel in terms of like manners and, country families, I translated into that private public school dynamic. Not just are they from a public private school, Leela's family is Hindu and Bengali Indian. Feroz is both Pakistani, Muslim, and British. So, it's kind of an interfaith relationship, although, that's kind of just a happenstance in the book as well. And then in the book, as you said, Alicia, the forensics community, the speech and debate community do kind of have to confront a lot of sexual harassment that's going on in it. And although I used that kind of Me Too moment to explore the kind of dastardly character of Mr. Wickham from Jane Austen's original novel, he's this 20, for those of you who haven't read, he's this 20s or 30-year-old guy who consistently hits on 15, 16-year-old young women. And in Jane Austen's novel, he kind of gets paid a dowry and gets away with it, right? Jane Austen disapproves of it, clearly detests him in the way she writes him. But in her cultural context, there's really no way for this guy to get payback. In my novel, we do have kind of a Me Too moment where the young women and, people of all genders, right, come together and really speak up and speak out. Unfortunately, I didn't have to make that part up. I was really being inspired by young folks in all sorts of different clubs and sports and teams, high school people who have been using the internet in really powerful ways to speak up against sexual harassment and, kind of inappropriate, sexist grooming, transphobic, homophobic, other kinds of behaviors that they found in their high school context. So when I was in high school, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have these spaces to kind of share our voices in potentially a little bit more anonymous ways, right? But these young people are going to these kind of Instagram posts and talking about these experiences. So I wanted to both honor the kind of frothy, frilly, witty, romantic love, but also honor the kind of love that it takes of yourself and your community to speak out like that. I think that that's a loving thing, to be able to speak out against injustice.
Absolutely. I think you really achieved that balance.
So that was the goal.
Yeah. Does anybody else want to chime in, or should I call on you alphabetically?
I can chime in. Yeah, I would say for me, I don't think I set out to write a romance. I think I was writing contemporary is what I'm used to writing, and it just quickly became obvious that it was going to have a lot of romance in it. So as far as how I struck the balance between the two, I think maybe my editor helped me with that a little bit. I think, we sort of did look at that and say, do we have enough romance in these sections? Is what else other stories are we looking at? And sort of going back and forth to finding a way to make sure that there's enough of both. And then of course, I'm going to relate it back to Dolly Parton again, because that's what I do. But I don't know, when I think of country music, so what I love about country music is most country songs tell a story. It's not just like a pop song where it's just like a catchy tune. There's actually like a deeper story to it usually. So that's kind of how I think of my book too. Like there's nothing wrong with a great pop song. But if you think of like Dolly Parton's 9 to 5, like that is very poppy. And if you're not really listening to the lyrics, you're like, oh yeah, this is a great song, makes me happy. But if you actually listen to the lyrics, it's a feminist anthem, and there is a deeper story there. So I don't know if I wouldn't compare myself to Dolly, of course, but like that was sort of what I was going for, of telling a story of queer joy that also has a lot of deeper meaning to it.
Mission accomplished. So thank you for that. Sajni, Ellen, did either one of you want to?
Oh, okay. I'll go real quick. I think there's so much love in my book as well. There's obviously the romance between the main character and her love interest, but that kind of takes a backseat because Zuri, my main character, she has a lot of love for her family and her culture and her elders. And even when she's having to figure out her own voice of how to stand up for herself and what she wants to do with her life, she's also having to face dilemmas with beauty standards and colorism, especially with the elders and the family, because there's this thing in my culture, or at least in my community and in my family, where you just don't talk back to your elders, even if it's a toxic thing that they're doing. So she's having to learn, navigate all these things, but she does it with, I intentionally had her consider different ways of doing this so that she still shows respect and love for everyone around her, because she also is able to appreciate what they mean to her and for her. So I did intend for this to be a romance, but I also intended it to be just like a loving book for like everyone, all the characters. Like there's no villain in this story. There's just a bunch of love and rainbows.
I loved that about it. It is bursting with love from cover to cover, and that made it a really wonderful read. Ellen, anything to add?
Yeah, I just was going to say, I love I feel like anybody who knows me knows I love a love story. So I want to hear a love stories. I want to hear about dates. So I'm always, and even when I'm teaching my students, I'm always writing ode poems with them. We're making lists of things they love. And so I think, I just want to echo what so many people have said. Love is radical. To love is radical and exciting. So when I get on the page, I'm always thinking about that. Also, there's something so special about the first love. The high school, there's this moment when the first love is the only time you feel the first love. It's the first time. And so I think often about the balance. To me is also figuring out where's the love of other things. In the book, it's very much love of community, love of the ocean. The book is very much about class too. It's about someone who's new coming in with a lot of money, with a lot of development. There's a very much of a working class community that's there on Long Beach Island. So there's spaces where the love story gets amped up and then places where it gets a little quiet. I just recorded the audiobook, and there were moments of the audiobook where I was like, where's the love? I got to get back to the love story. And there's like, you're figuring out, I think even as Brian, you were talking about there was moments with my editor, I would get much more invested in the storm and then be like, oh, right, the love story's here too. So figuring out how to thread and braid all the parts of who you are and all the parts of who young people are into the story. I think that's the part that feels so exciting about writing a book, because you are on the journey with that character. You're figuring out what makes a good love story and what makes and what makes a whole and nuanced characters, and how can they be many things at once. So it's exciting to figure out that balance.
Well, we're just about out of time. So I just want to say, before I let you know about a little something extra at the end and wrap up, I would like to personally say to all four of you that as I was reading these wildly different stories, 4 incredibly different stories based in so many different contexts and truths, one thing that really struck me that I so loved is that not only are each of your main characters truly embracing their own authenticity, but not a single one of them is really running from who they are, but more truly embracing it. And that's something that is missing in a lot of teen stories and gets frustrating when, they just want to be something other than they are. And something that I truly loved through all 4 of the books was how invested and affectionate and intense each of those main characters were about not staying where they are, but staying who they are and truly knowing what was important. So it made for really wonderful, diverse, fun, interesting, swoony, funny, wish I could hang out with them, want to listen to their music and hear their songs. And I want to see pictures of Wanda and Verna. And I want to hear Zuri's violin. And I want to hear Leela sing Hamilton. And I absolutely want to go and hang out and clean a beach with Eliza. So I want to thank you all so much for your contributions to the genre and to multiple genres. I would be really able to spend a long time talking to each of you about each of your books, and hope I do get the opportunity to do that. Thank you all so much for coming. Thank you for everybody at NABA and SIBA and NVNR for reimagining this and keeping us all, able to be in a space together until we can be together in person again. Please, everybody, stick around, stay tuned, because we do have a video presentation from author Amanda McCrinna following this immediately. And once again, thank you so much to Ellen Hagan, to Cyantani Das Gupta, to Sajni Patel, to Brian Kennedy. Your work is so appreciated and loved, and thank you for being here.